Well, it was David Pollock this morning on ESPN. I think he was on Get Up doing a hit from Ohio State talking about the dogs. He said this. He said, "I'm very curious to see Georgia. I think they are very much in the playoff picture at the end of the season, but you have to go through Alabama at the SEC championship game. You are breaking in a lot of young guys who you have to grow. I think it's a very tough ask for Georgia." And when he said the last part, he was talking about beating Alabama in the championship game. David has always called it like he sees it, and I'm actually very thankful for that because a lot of guys have their glasses shaded a little too much for my liking. Um, his global point here was, and I could only write so fast, was that Georgia's probably going to have to be undefeated to go to the SEC championship game and go on no matter what, which is a pretty common assumption in today's college football. I think he's right about that. And I think he's expressing what a lot of people around the program are curious to see. Can this defense, very specifically, get to where it needs to be by the end of the season? No one thinks that Georgia no one thinks someone other than Georgia is going to wind up in the SEC championship game. They just think it's going to be the Dogs. Make sure you're picking up DAWGSTRUCTION today. The link is down below. If you've not seen this before, it's our 80-page guide, commemorative edition of Georgia in the national championship. You can flip through a couple of pages of it real quick here. This is actually after the SEC championship game last year. Of course, the Dogs went on to beat Michigan and go on to play in the national championship game against Alabama. If you've not seen this before, make sure you're picking up today. The link is down below. No one really thinks that Georgia is going to, someone other than Georgia is going to go to the SEC championship game. So there's a couple of different ways to look at it. You can look at it and say, "Oh, well, they've got a mulligan, in their back pocket." I don't buy that. I think you have to go out and win all the time. That cannot be the thinking in the program. I'm certain it is not. But when you look at this Oregon game and the opportunity you get from it, you're talking about a team that probably won't, but could win the Pac-12. I mean, I think Utah is in the best position to win the Pac-12. But this game gives you an opportunity to potentially have a win over a 9 or 10 win team. You don't get a lot of those. And Georgia's schedule is not, like a season ago. The Clemson win, as it turns out, didn't do a ton for Georgia just because Clemson, wasn't great last year. But at the start of the season, I think it gave the Dogs a lot of confidence. By the end of the season, their work spoke for itself. You get such a great opportunity in this game. It's going to look like Christmas out there with all that red and green. You get a great opportunity to go up against some really good players. I think David, from what I recall listening last night on game day, I think David's view of Oregon is that maybe they're a little further along than my view is of them. I'm not sure how either of us can really know, frankly, because there's just a lot of new meats and vegetables in this stew that is the Oregon Ducks. For Georgia, there's also some new parts for sure. But we already know what Jalen Carter can do. We know what Keely Reed can do. We are well aware of Nolan Smith and Christopher Smith, no relation. We understand Robert Beal, William Poole. Georgia's got a lot of people back. Now, the question is, can Zion Logue have the type of year that approaches what Jordan was able to do? I think Zion can be on the field more. I don't know that means he's a better player. Can Mikael Williams be, baby Trevor Walker? Is that what we're talking about? Because if that's what he is, then he might be toddler Trayvon Walker by the end of the season. And as we recall, baby Trayvon Walker in 2019 was hard to deal with. So there's a lot of growing up here that you've got to have if you're the Dogs. It's what it is. This is the sport we're in. You have to replace players. And at the end of the day, the bar is getting to getting to the playoff and winning the national championship. Right now, Georgia is trailing Alabama and Ohio State. That's the perception right now. There's a lot of firepower at Ohio State, no doubt. We're going to see that Saturday night. A lot of people give Notre Dame almost no chance. We're going to see what Alabama has in these couple of weeks. They're going to be indicative of where Alabama's at. I don't know that it's going to be, you know, Texas. I'm skeptical of Texas, generally speaking. Alabama should have an undefeated regular season, but they have some challenging games. We get to see Georgia and Ohio State right off the bat. We get to see Notre Dame right off the bat. Georgia Tech's pretty bad, but I even think you get to see a little bit of Clemson right off the bat. So, I mean, Georgia Tech's really bad, okay? But let's keep in mind, Georgia Tech was really bad last year, and they came down to a goal, I think a goal line stand that Clemson had to have to beat Georgia Tech. Now, someone could correct me if I'm wrong. So I want to see if there's progress there. I think they won 14-6 or something like that. Something unacceptable was what it was. So we get to see, the progression of Georgia, Clemson, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Alabama all in the first weekend of the season. Just the progression, not the verdict. We need to see how Keely performs all the time. We have to see how, I mean, Keely Ringo has had this moment. A lot of people, this is the Keely Ringo moment. This is probably, I mean, I hate to be like this now, but in terms of actual images, this might be the most famous Keely Ringo images because I know how many of y'all bought the book. Okay. This has been our image of Keely, Georgia, and everything for the last 9 months. This, although the link is available below, is gone. This is gone. This is gone. Okay, you need to remember it, and that's what the book is for. But what happened is over. It's been over for Kirby and them about 8.5 months. For Georgia fans, they're about to see this thing is over, and you have to totally move forward. I think the Oregon game helps with that because when you think about, in this is totally going off memory. When you think about the 17 Alabama team, the team that beat Georgia on the last play of the game for the national championship. They had lost the season before on the last play of the game in 16, they lost on the last play of the game to Clemson for the national championship. They opened the season against Florida State in a 1-2 matchup in the Chick-fil-A kickoff game in Atlanta. Now, this game, I know people don't really remember it well, maybe the way they should. But that game was an immediate call to arms for Alabama, for lack of a better term, and for Florida State, too. We saw off the bat that Alabama had to be ready for the season. And although they were not one of the better Alabama national champion teams, they won the national championship. And was that because of the work they did in the summer? Did they get that opportunity because they played in the playoff and they played in the Chick-fil-A game, and then they went on? They lost to Alabama, Auburn, remember, and then they got into the playoff. This first game lets you, in Mark Richt terms, set your jaw. It lets you know that it's go time, man. And having been to the practices, and knowing people around the program, I would be shocked, and not in a Casablanca kind of way. I would be shocked if Georgia came out flat. I'd be surprised if they lost. I wouldn't be floored. I'd be surprised if they lost. I'd be shocked if they were not ready to play. This is a program where I'm mixing metaphors again here. This is a program where, as a player, you have to go out and hunt just to play, just to have your snaps. That's challenging, y'all. I mean, I live in a competitive marketplace. There's a lot of good people that cover Georgia, like a lot of good, it's a popular beat. And you can't just sit around and write 2 articles a week or 3 articles a week and think you matter. You have to grind it out. At the Georgia football programs, it's far worse than that. If you don't perform You will be replaced. If you get hurt, you could be replaced. There are no shortage of players. The question is, and David's question is, and his comment is as follows. I'm very curious to see Georgia. I think they are very much in the playoff picture at the end of the season. You have to go through Alabama in the SEC championship game, but you're breaking a lot of young players who you have to grow. I think it's a very tough ask for Georgia. He discussed many times the 15 players that left. They're not all defensive players, but Georgia lost a lot of talent. They did. James Cook is not walking through that door. Okay, but Alabama lost a lot of talent. Ohio State lost some guys. Clemson lost players. I could not name who they are, but they lost them. Notre Dame lost its coach. You're always going to lose people in college football. The question is, can you get it right when it's time to eat? Can you get it right when it's time to eat? We're going to see this weekend.